So we're waiting for the our media guy, John. Uh, so the way we're gonna do this morning is we'll go through, I believe, the Secretary of Finance first, and then OPM. Uh, we did call Miss V in because the other two guards reported yesterday, so maybe we can have Miss V go first since it will be the shortest. Or I'll leave it to the members. How do you guys want to do this? We called Miss V in because she was the last of the GAR that was signing the documents. So, is there any member that has question to pose to Miss Villagomez? Just you, two of you guys. Wala. Meron wala. Okay. So we'll have Miss Villagomez, please. I believe we'll start with you since there's only a couple of questions. I know you're pretty busy with other stuff. Um, is Mr. Villagomez in the building or Warren? No. Uh, I believe his schedule will be at 2 p.m. today. Um, okay. Sarge, so is John ready? There is a 5-minute rule that I was being reminded, but the rule is if a member goes for 8 minutes, I have to give the other member 8 minutes. So if everybody stays within that time frame, then we should be okay. We're good. Good morning, everyone. I call the Special Committee for Federal Assistance and Disaster-Related Funding to order. Let the records show that the quorum has been established. And today we have three witnesses, so we have a lot to cover, and hopefully we'll be done here by 12 o'clock. As we all know, again, the Commonwealth has received funding, the CARES Act, in the tune of $36 million for COVID pandemic, FEMA, OIA, and let the record show that over $54 million was obligated within the general fund, and I believe this body will be deliberating this week in regards to the community disaster loan, and with about $93 million that it's the administration plans to loan from FEMA. The responsibility of this committee pretty much to track all the funds and reviewing, and hopefully we are optimizing so it's our responsibility ability as a committee is to track all the funds and making sure that the funds are optimized and hopefully give recommendation. But I believe we are doing it differently since the administration has a executive order. So we're kind of going backwards. The normal process is the administration or the governor identifies funds, and then the legislature participates on how the funding will be allocated. In this case, would be the COVID-19 task force give recommendations, and then the task force would give these recommendations to the administration. So we're kind of going backwards right now. So I'll start with Sarge. Can you administer the oath first before we begin uh, to everyone?
Please raise your right hand and repeat after me. I state your name.
I, Frannie Salas,
Do solemnly swear
do solemnly swear,
under the penalty of perjury
under the penalty of perjury,
that the testimony you shall give
that the testimony you shall give
in the matter at hand
in the matter at hand
shall be the truth,
shall be the truth,
the whole truth,
the whole truth,
and nothing but the truth.
and nothing but the truth.
So help me God.
So help me God.
Thank you, everyone. And now I'll start by recognizing Ms. Villagomez. And for the record, please state your name and your role in the COVID-19 task force or as GAR for the record.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Virginia Villagomez. I am the Special Assistant for Management and Budget. I am also the Governor's Authorized Representative for 8 disasters prior to COVID, and I was appointed the Governor's Authorized Representative under the Emergency Declaration for COVID, Emergency Declaration number 3463. And I am also the alternate Governor's Authorized Representative for COVID under Disaster Recovery number 4511.
Thank you, Ms. Villagomez. And with that, since you'll be the first one to go first, I'll open up the question. I believe there's only 2 members that wanted to pose question, or a few. So let me start by recognizing Rep. Lipan. And I recognize Rep. Sablan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and good morning, Ms. Villagomez. Good morning, Secretary Atalig, and good morning, Ms. Salas. So my first question is, well, first of all, would you clarify when your role shifted from Governor's Authorized Rep for COVID-19 to alternate GAR for COVID-19?
I believe it was on Monday, April 6th, or whatever April 6th came about. It was on April 6th.
And what was the reason for the change?
So if you look at the history of, the appointments as Governor's Authorized Representative, all of the appointments occurred between July and December for major disaster declarations resulting from major storms. And COVID happened during the time that outside that the window that calendar month. So COVID happened between January and April, and that was during the time that the Office of Management and Budget is tasked, for the preparation and submission of the Commonwealth's budget for fiscal year 2021, and there was a conflict. On every major declaration, FEMA submits a federal Commonwealth agreement to the Commonwealth, and it's sent to me directly, and I would forward the document, with a notation to the governor indicating that this is an opportunity for him to name who the governor's authorized representative and all the other parties that are listed in there. So the governor has that opportunity to name that individual at hand, at his choice. During that time, that was just following that submission of the Commonwealth budget, and there were a lot of things that, that I was working on that relates to the budget. So in the best interest of the Commonwealth, the governor opted to nominate Patrick Guerrero, who was the public assistance officer, reporting, to the GAR and the governor at the same time for the major disaster declarations that we have.
Okay, so at this time you are the alternate GAR, and Patrick Guerrero is the GAR, but he's also the public assistance officer for previous disasters, and he reports to you for those.
Yes.
Okay. The special committee is in receipt of letters requesting waivers of exempt status for certain government employees, including yourself and other appointed officials. Have such waiver requests been submitted before in prior disasters?
Waivers as in?
Waivers of exempt status.
Waivers of exempt status. I don't recall any waivers submitted on my behalf, but we were the official that would report as first responders, taking into account that we have, the people of the Commonwealth, that we have to ensure that the community is safe. So as first responders, we report directly to the Homeland Security, and that's where the strategic planning comes about in regards to how do we address the disaster forward.
Right. So in COVID-19, it was Homeland Security, the special assistant, who submitted these letters to OPM requesting waivers of exempt status, and your name was on one of the first lists that went out. So I guess to make sure that I'm understanding you, then you're saying that that wasn't the process before in previous disasters.
There is a form that is completed, and it's a form that is developed by the Homeland Security. So it's a standard form for every disaster. Homeland uses that form with respect to compensation, as in, performing the work outside your normal regular assignment.
Sure, but specifically for waiving exempt status, as to eligibility for overtime or additional pay, this was the first disaster that was done.
I don't recall seeing that particular document. Each one of us would keep our own time and submits that to the Homeland Security. There is, though, an OPM can elaborate more in regards to, the personal service system rules and regulations. So I don't know what you've seen, and with respect to the regulation, but whatever policy exists because COVID is a different disaster, so whatever policy exists, that's the policy that we would refer to if there was no existing policy associated with any disasters outside of a major typhoon or declaration. So what policy would you defer to? You would defer to an existing policy that the government uses. So in the case of typhoon emergency, page 76 of the Civil Service Personal Service System Rules and Regs, page 76, item D would indicate that. But there is also another part of the regulation, which is the Accepted Service Rules and Regulation that talks about overtime. And I don't know, the way I read it, and I've discussed this yesterday with the Acting Director of Personnel Management, that I think there may be a conflict in regards to what item D of section 1010 something. It's page 76 of the administrative code. But I would recommend that the committee look into that.
Have you had a chance to review the Attorney General's opinion with respect to typhoon emergency pay, and in particular, overtime or emergency pay for cabinet members?
I was not provided a copy of that.
But you have heard that there is this opinion?
I have heard of the opinion.
Did you ever request an opinion of your own as GAR for prior disasters?
For prior disasters, as in U2, when that letter was issued in regards to how compensation would have taken place, I did send a letter to the Secretary of Finance at that time to explain to me what their understanding is on how the 2.5 would be made applicable. So, and then from that, I made a template showing different scenarios of how, that 2.5 would have taken place, but there was never a response coming back.
That was with the prior Secretary of Finance, Larissa Larson.
Yes, ma'am.
Would you please provide the committee with that letter?
Yes.
And then also, my last question for this round. In U2, didn't the governor issue a blanket directive authorizing the 2.5 pay for all exempted employees, including cabinet members?
So again, I defer to the regulation, because the regulation, the Personal Service Systems Rules and Regs, did not even identify whether cabinet members. It just says employees regularly scheduled to work.
Right, but the question is, wasn't there a memo, a directive from the governor that purported to authorize that for exempted employees?
There is a letter, and the letter, although it does not cite the Personal Service System Rules and Regs, it references whatever is in here.
Thank you. Would you please provide the committee with a copy of that letter as well?
I will.
Thank you. I yield.
Rep. Liban.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, Vic, Secretary, and Director Frannie Salas. Vic, you mentioned you started assuming responsibility of GAR in April, or am I mistaken? You mentioned April 6. Maybe I'm incorrect.
April 6 was when the title referred.
Oh,
I became the alternate GAR on,
so
upon the signing of the FEMA Commonwealth Agreement.
so you started when actually? March or February?
March 23rd was when the emergency declaration, the FEMA Commonwealth Agreement, was signed by Mr. Fenton and the governor, naming myself as the governor's authorized representative and Angel de Mapan as the alternate GAR for the emergency declaration. So whenever there is a declaration, it's either what type of declaration the governor has requested. In this case, for COVID-19, the emergency declaration was issued without a request because it was applied across all of the states and the territories, and the Commonwealth was assigned a number at the time when we received it. It was emergency declaration number 3463 for COVID for the Northern Mariana Islands.
So I'm trying to correlate because I'm looking at some of the purchase requisition, and one particular purchase requisition was for glove, nitrate, powder-free, and disposal anti-odor mask. Did this requisition went forward, or was it canceled?
Um, okay, so you mentioned the items, but you did not mention the.
It's from Guma Familia Estate, LCC.
I don't recall that vendor. Uh,
Well, it
Congressman.
has your name here, concurred by Virginia C. Villagomez. And I'm trying to figure out whether this went through, and because I wanted to. Was provided by Secretary of Finance, I believe. So I'm trying to figure out whether this purchase requisition went forward and was this vendor paid. Uh, that was one of the concern. The other one was I'm trying to find out. There was another one that's pending for safety management that was issued out March 29 for N95 hand sanitizers and gloves. Was this ever processed for purchase? This is safety management system for
Do
147,000.
you have the reference PO number, sir, so I can look it up?
Well, it's only a purchase requisition. This is what we got from finance, and that's what I mentioned to the chair that because of concerns yesterday that we were relating this purchase requisition absence of supporting documents to justify what was requested and what was purchased. So that's the hiccups that we had yesterday, and I asked the chairman to try to get some sort of copy so we can, not ask question if it's purchased, but just kind of ask question whether it's the right stuff that was received our end. So I can't give you a PO number because it does not have a PO number other than a purchase requisition that was requested by Homeland Security. And these are the concern that I'm asking. And, I mentioned to the chairman that we might need to bring in the acting director for procurement and supply to find out the status of all these purchases. But should you have any idea, I would appreciate that you share. But the biggest concern I have, just one more, Chairman, is the negotiation for this Asia Pacific Hotels DBA Canoa Resort, which was issued out March 25th, 2020, for the facilities rental of $9.2 million. Was that negotiated? And by who negotiated? Because you have your concurrence on this?
The representative of the government was Patrick Guerrero. At that time, he was the person who had negotiated that contract. I am not sure whether Warren Villagomez, the chairman of the task force, joined Mr. Guerrero at the time that the negotiation occurred. But I know that Kathleen, former Assistant Attorney General Kathleen Turner, was also providing guidance to Patrick at the same time.
But were you consulted by Patrick Guerrero, and did you question the numbers that I'm alluding to? I know that we wanted to move hastily, and get this facilities because of the pandemic, but I'm just trying to figure out whether this amount justified the emergency need right there and then, because if I'm not mistaken, the governor should have just exercised his authority and take back Canoa, and we can deal with paying the remainder of the leasehold, because I know that Canoa's lease is coming up soon. But what I'm trying to allude is, how did they base this? Is it based per room, or they based it by square footage? I'm trying to just quantify the number because it's a huge number. So maybe, Secretary, if you can chime in and help me out a little bit. Is that okay? Chairman? Proceed.
Thank you, Congressman Lipan. In terms of the hotel was negotiated, obviously, with consultation with FEMA rep that's on island, Castley, Assistant Attorney General, and the GAR, or Patrick Guerrero. Mr. Villagomez also was involved. That's my understanding. How they came about the pricing was based on a lot of the services that was at the time needed to be in the contract. Versus, we had cleaning and sanitation. We had issues with obviously cleaning the rooms. We also had everything was inclusive in this agreement, including meals. And as we proceeded in the contract, a lot of changes were made and adjusted based on the task force recommendation, and obviously in consultation with the CHCC and their recommendations.
Well, Secretary,
in terms of the numbers, I don't know how that was.
I'm looking at the purchase requisition, and this amount is only facilities rental. You alluded the meals, that's a different on the purchase requisition. That's an additional cost that was broken down by lot. In the entire cost of this purchase requisition was for $14.2 million with the add-on. What I'm trying to figure out is how did they come up with this specific number or this specific amount just for the facilities? Because you're talking about the hotel itself. That's what it's alluding to me.
Yeah,
It does not pertain to manpower and others. It's just facilities. And when it says facilities rental, we're renting something that's an asset after the lease of the public. So, that's what I'm trying to justify to myself, that I need to know how did they come up with this amount for the rental of the Canoa Resort.
Thank you, Chairman. Congressman Lipan. It may have been titled and marked as facility rentals, but what I had mentioned is all inclusive in that amount. That amount was also a not to exceed amount. So that was like an open PO up to that amount. There's been a lot of changes as we went into this project or in this agreement that changed the figure. We won't be paying that full amount. That's still being ironed out in terms of what was actually based on the contract. There's ways to reduce the cost, and we didn't take advantage, or the meal program you're talking about, that was all inclusive in the beginning, and that's what's in that full amount.
Last question. Did we pay this already, or did FEMA pay this $14.2 million to Canoa?
Not yet.
Asia Pacific?
It's still in the process of the requests being approved.
This has yet to be paid, plus the new price that was issued out.
That's correct.
I'll yield for this time, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Before I recognize a non-member, okay, Rep. Sablan.
Thank you, Chair. Just real quick, good morning, Ms. V, Secretary, and Acting Director Frannie. Just a question for Ms. V. With regards to the U2, have we already received all reimbursements for U2, and if there's any pending, what is the status on the pending for reimbursements?
We've received over 200, I would say 201 project worksheets as of this morning. 200 project worksheets awarding funds to subrecipients that have submitted an application on all of the different categories A, B, C, all the way through G and Z, to the Commonwealth, and it also includes funding towards Tinian and Saipan.
So how many in figures have we received in reimbursement and how many are pending? If there is any pending, and for those that haven't gone through the screening process of FEMA, can
The
you
last
expound?
time I've looked at the report, there's over $200 million that has already been awarded to the Commonwealth with respect to the public assistance program. There's over $100 million that we have drawn down and paid out to vendors as well. So there's approximately, combined with the local share, somewhere around 70-something million dollars that has yet to be processed on the awards that has already been given to the Commonwealth that relates to work to be completed for repair, replacement of facilities and or contents.
Okay, with the matching requirements for the central government, how are we going at with that? Maybe perhaps, Secretary, that's the line of questions to you. Do you have the funding so that we can proceed with all these pending projects, most especially with Public Assistance Office, with the major reconstruction or restoration of government facilities?
If I may, Congressman, early on, we secured some matching funds through the Office of Insular Affairs because we could use our CIP allocation towards matching for infrastructure projects. So we've secured $5 million for U2, and we have that. That is equivalent to approximately, 5 million is equivalent to approximately 50 million worth of projects. However, OIA funds, OIA requires us to go through the NEPA process. However, we've requested if OIA can accept the NEPA process that FEMA has done already on all of these projects that were awarded, so that it can be a unified, it's a unified coordination actually, because they're both federal programs. They both go through the same federal regulatory agencies. However, that is not the case. OIA still wants the Commonwealth that those projects to be funded has to go through the NEPA process, and OIA contracts their NEPA review through the Army Corps of Engineers. So we have that. We've also included, or we've submitted a request for the additional matching under the CDBG-DR program for both Mancute and U2 across the Commonwealth in the amount of $30 million.
Okay, so how are we going with the NEPA process requirement by OIA? Are we already have started the process?
We have to address it on a project-by-project basis, so we cannot do it on a blanket. So whatever projects that's ready to be executed, we would have to submit that to OIA. They approve the allocation, and then OIA will transmit the NEPA process through Army Corps of Engineers. Then we wait for an authorization a recommended authorization to proceed, and then OIA will issue an authorization to proceed.
Okay, and my last question, thank you for the response. Is there any deadline for this funding? Do we have a deadline that we need to exhaust this funding for the OIA funds, the public assistance projects, pending projects?
OIA, upon the grant award, there's a 5-year performance period depending on when that CIP funds were allocated. So if it was allocated in FY 2020, there's a 5-year period for that funds to expire. For the FEMA U2 projects, there are critical timelines as well on the different categories. So categories C through G, the timeline is 12 months, and then after the 12 months, FEMA has that authority to extend it. So there is a critical period of performance.
So none of these fundings have been extended. We haven't even gotten to that point. We're still in the process. Is that fair to say?
We are still in the process. There's approximately maybe 30 more project worksheets that FEMA still has to process. We still have not received Hopwood. We still have not received the Northern Marianas College. There's, I would say, approximately maybe 39 to 40 million more dollars that we are still awaiting from FEMA for those project worksheets.
Thank you for that response. I yield for now, Mr. Chairman, to allow other members to ask questions.
Thank you, Mr. Flor. Rep Probst, before you proceed, is there any other questions for Ms. V so we can start going through for her? Okay.
Ms. V, on the subject of reimbursements for debris removal and emergency protective measures, the Congressional Office, as well as Administrator Fenton, reported that there is approximately 21 million reimbursed to Commonwealth entities for debris removal and another 27 million for emergency protective measures, and that all work has been completed and no local match required. So if that is the case, why are we still hearing from vendors that are awaiting payment for the work that they did with respect to emergency protective measures as well as debris removal?
Those would be in the window of those pending project worksheets that FEMA is still reviewing. However, from those two categories that you mentioned, Mr. Fenton is correct. It has been awarded to the Commonwealth at 100%, except there were two project worksheets that fell outside that 180 days that we were given 100% waiver. But the amount is very minimal, and it relates to freight and the burning of the debris down in Marpi and in Tinian. Very, very small amount, but yes, there is, that funding that the Commonwealth received and the Department of Finance has disbursed, I would say, 97% of Cat A. There's still about $2.7 million in Cat A that's pending for disbursement, and maybe about a little bit over $1 million for Cat B, aside from the ones that we're still waiting on. This morning, the Commonwealth received over $3.5 million. I'm not sure which category it is. I would have to go online to pull down the report, but that was for the Commonwealth Utilities Corporation. So I'm not sure whether that was for Cat B for CUC or whether it was a Cat Z or a Cat F.
But outside of freight and the burning of debris, you're saying that all other vendors who performed work for the Commonwealth under debris removal or emergency protective measures should have been compensated by now.
There are a few that have yet to be compensated, and there is a version that we have submitted already to FEMA, and FEMA is looking into it. So versions that fall under the Homeland Security, that has not been finalized. FEMA's still reviewing that, and there's, we're still waiting for that. So there's still payment to vendors that are due, and we acknowledge that for whatever inquiries that were made to the U.S. Congressman's office, we have a record of that particular vendor, and that, whatever allocation, that version has been submitted to FEMA, and we are now awaiting for an approval that would be written not under the mayor's office, but it would be written under the Homeland Security.
Thank you, I yield.
Rep. Ropes.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, colleagues. And good morning, GAR Vicky and Secretary Atalig, Director Salas. Thank you for spending time with us this morning. We appreciate your time, especially with your busy schedules. These questions are for GAR Vicky. FEMA has made it very clear to the Commonwealth that it will not reimburse for personnel expenses that violate federal or Commonwealth policy. To clarify, one of the emails I received and I shared with colleagues was from a FEMA official who stated, for the Commonwealth to be reimbursed for the expenses related to the overtime you're referring to, you two, the CNMI must first incur the expense. FEMA reimbursements must be reasonable and within existing CNMI policy. It has been reported that the CNMI will not be reimbursed by FEMA for millions of dollars in overtime and emergency pay during the Typhoon U2 response and recovery effort, because these expenses were either improperly documented or they violated CNMI or federal policy. Do you, by any chance, know what that amount is?
I don't have the report in front of me. If I can just get access to the internet, I can open up my computer and pull reports out. But as far as FEMA policy, so this is my understanding with respect to payment to the Commonwealth associated to U2 labor costs. So all of the folks that had responded to U2 that were reassigned from their existing responsibility to respond to U2 will be paid their straight time pay. And then FEMA will pay 1.5 on all overtime associated with the work responding to U2. So that's 1.0 for the reassignment on the regular hours, and then 1.5 on the overtime.
You have this in writing?
This has been communicated with me by one of the FEMA staff, but I can check in my email whether I have it in writing. But I can also obtain it in writing.
I appreciate that, because that's very different from our understanding and our communications. So it would be good to be on the same page on that. So if you could forward that, and then I can send that to the FEMA officials we've been working with to explain that. So for those that were not reimbursable, whether it was because of improperly documentation or possible violations of CNMI policy, if it's not reimbursed by FEMA, then does the general fund simply absorb these costs? Do we absorb these costs?
So in every disaster that the Commonwealth is, is faced with, the Secretary of Finance or the Department of Finance would establish a business unit under the general fund for that particular disaster. So all obligations and expenditures are booked into that particular business unit and all of the expenses. So when you call up for a report that relates to U2 or to COVID, you just call up that business unit and it produces that report of what types of obligations or expenses or payments against, those obligations.
Have-
That's how we handle the disaster.
So for frontline workers, are there still frontline workers still awaiting their overtime pay from you two?
I don't have any information with them. I believe Homeland Security should have that information, whether they have been submitted to the Department of Finance, whether the Department of Finance has received it and have not paid for it. I don't have the running total of who got paid and who has not been paid.
Thank you. And the reason why I ask is because there are still several frontline workers who have reached out, not to just myself, but other colleagues who have been concerned about not getting paid. So if it would be possible to get some documentation as to the estimated amount as to who has or has not received their overtime pay, that would be appreciated. And I just wanted to ask, I know we're talking about you two, but this is just a comparison, compare and contrast. After Sodalor in 2015, are you aware of any cabinet members who received overtime pay for work done after Sodalor when the late Governor Eloy Enos was in charge?
Following Sodalor, so are you referring to activities,
Yes.
response activities, or
Yes, the
recovery
response.
activities
Response
that
and
relates
recovery.
to Sodalor?
Yes. Were cabinet members paid dual pay compensation or overtime or any additional payment beyond their salaries?
I believe the Department of Finance can run a report to identify who were paid. So in the report, it would reflect 100, 120, or 150. So 120 is 2.0, 150 is,
Would that be the Secretary of Finance that would be able to provide that information to us?
they would be the appropriate agency to
Okay.
run a report and submit that to the committee. But
Okay,
as far as your question relates to during the time Governor Enos was there, I recall that there was one enactment of legislation which became part of the Appropriations Act that gave that authority for response activity coordinators to be paid at 1.0.
Okay. And the reason why I ask that is because from my understanding and my discussions with certain former and present cabinet members was that they did not receive overtime because Governor Enos would not permit it because he said that they were salaried. And I also spoke to cabinet members, former cabinet members that served under former Governor Fitial, who said that he was fiscally conservative and would not allow cabinet members to receive any overtime whatsoever. So I just wanted to show to compare and contrast. And speaking of comparing and contrasting, have you ever reviewed the huge disparity in overtime pay after U2 between cabinet members and frontline workers? Have you ever examined those amounts that were paid to the frontline workers versus cabinet members?
Are you referring to COVID?
U2.
I have reviewed payments to all of the folks, the employees that had responded to to you too. I have looked at all of them.
And as we have reviewed a lot of them too, and that's, I think, what was alarming was the amounts that were paid out, and especially given the work that was done by frontline workers. And again, these are concerns and complaints that we received from our constituents. We had people that were clearing debris, doing the roadside clearing, setting up tents, putting in many hours, and we looked at their overtime versus cabinet members. So there is a huge disparity in that. I just want to state that for the record. And I'll wrap this up, Chairman. If you were aware that the Attorney General's 9-page opinion on U2 was that there were improper overtime payments made to cabinet members, did you, as GAR, take any action, reach out for legal advice, or to ensure that this didn't happen again for this COVID-19 pandemic?
For the COVID-19 pandemic, I've looked at the report in regards to who got paid within, cabinet members, and all of them were paid 1.0. Whoever was paid were there. I don't recall seeing anyone got paid 1.5 based on the report that was produced.
So from my understanding, 1.0 is essentially dual compensation, right?
Again, I would defer to the regulation. It says for all other hours such employees are required to work while such declaration of emergency shall remain in force, compensation shall be at the rate of 2.5 times the base salary rate.
Okay. That's, yes, for typhoons. And I just want to reiterate that in his opinion, the Attorney General, in his 9-page opinion, towards the very end, in conclusion, he said, as to the extra payment for typhoon emergency work, cabinet members are not covered under any of the foregoing regulations, nor is there any statute authorizing extra payment for typhoon emergency work. As such, even if the governor's directives were intended to authorize such payment to cabinet members, there is no legal basis for doing so. Even in his recommendation, he stated this: a review of the payroll records and the compensation of typhoon emergency work is in order to ensure that government employees are paid in accordance with law. My office, this is from the Attorney General, is prepared to work with the public auditor's staff in reviewing the option of recoupment of any overpayments made to employees based on OPA's review and findings. This 9-page opinion was crucial in determining cabinet members the legal basis of receiving such overtime pay, whether we consider it dual compensation 1.0 or whatever we want to call it, it's still extra pay. And what we have repeated yesterday, and we're repeating it again a couple of times, is the fact that by statute, appointed officials are capped. Their salaries are capped. And to add to that, there is, by Commonwealth law, Section 10-20.2-354 that bars dual compensation or dual employment. This is law. It says no employee shall receive compensation for 2 positions or 2 appointments in the personnel service. When an employee is engaged in government work other than in the employee's regular position, such employee shall be placed in leave without pay from the regular position. That's 1. Or number 2, continue the government salary and reject the salary for the second position, whichever is to the employee's personal advantage. Did any of the cabinet members during this COVID-19 pandemic, did they take leave without pay to receive their second payment or their dual compensation?
I am not aware of any cabinet member taking leave. There was administrative leave that is applied across for the government shutdown. However, there are some of us that have been required to report to work.
Okay. And last comment, I apologize. I just want you to know that we did receive from our legal counsel um, this memorandum regarding overtime authorizations for exempt employees. And I read it this morning, I just got it. And from our legal counsel, it says the Director of Personnel has no authority to waive the overtime exempt status for employees not covered by the Civil Service Commission. And according to the Attorney General's 9-page opinion, that cabinet members are not covered by the Civil Service Commission. So these are not just concerns, but we are dealing with Commonwealth law. And all the more reason why this is important, that we do not make the same mistakes we made after U2. And we were told that. We learned a lot from U2. But based on what we are seeing, it appears perhaps we are not. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Rep. Probst. Ms. Villagomez, did you want to respond, or is it that? No comment? Is there any questions to Ms. Villagomez before we excuse her?
Point of clarification, Mr. Chairman and colleagues. Ms. Villagomez's clarification of FEMA's policy indicated her understanding that the people who were reassigned from their regular duties would be paid by the CNMI at 1.0 for straight time and 1.5 for overtime for hours worked above that. And that's guidance that you received from FEMA, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. But to clarify, that FEMA guidance is actually consistent with the guidance that we've received, because that would apply to employees who are eligible for overtime or typhoon emergency pay in the first place. Would you agree with that?
Can you repeat what you just said?
The FEMA guidance that you received is consistent with the guidance that we received, because that overtime, those overtime payments would apply to, and we could get reimbursed for overtime paid out to employees who were eligible for overtime in the first place.
Yes.
Okay. And then just again to reiterate for the record, as Congressman Probst here noted from the Attorney General's opinion, not all government employees who received overtime or typhoon emergency pay were actually eligible. And in fact, he says that improper payments were made not only to cabinet members, but also to other employees who were not eligible for overtime in the first place. And so I guess the question still comes back to you, Ms. Villagomez. What is a Commonwealth liability? What are we on the hook to pay that we will not get reimbursed for from FEMA in the end? It's been reported that amount totals millions of dollars for improper payments that were made to people who were not eligible in the first place legally. And if you are able to pull that up now that you have internet access, would you be able to provide us with that amount?
I can pull up the information, through the system. I would have to sign into our financial management system to look at how much to date, has been paid out in labor costs for U2, and how much to date, the Commonwealth has been reimbursed. I know that the latest reimbursement that the Commonwealth received associated to labor was a little bit over 2.2 million, and we are still anticipating additional, which was a version that we had submitted 2 weeks ago.
So you'd be able to provide that report to this committee?
Yes, I will.
Thank you. I yield.
Thank you, Rep. Sablan. Rep. Castro, we're planning to excuse Ms. V because we have other witnesses. Okay. Okay, Ms. V, you're excused.
Thank you.
so moving along, we'll continue with Secretary of Finance. Mr. Secretary, so reminder, you're on the roll, and for the record, your position and role under the task force. What is your position? What's your role in the task force, pretty much?
Thank you, Chairman. If I may, I have some opening comments and probably can identify that. I am for the record, my name is David Atalig. I am the CNMI Secretary of Finance. And I want to thank you very much, Chairman and members of this committee. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to discuss with you today on the critical role the Department of Finance plays in this overall CNMI response to the COVID-19 pandemic. As a Secretary of Finance, I want to start by clearly laying out the duties and responsibilities of the department. The department collects and deposits all local raised revenues, receives and deposits all funds from the federal government, holds accountability of government assets, and is responsible for providing direction and support in financial policy formulation, financial management, and monitoring of financial performance for the whole CNMI government. Since my appointment as Secretary in 2019, my goal is to drive practical, cost-effective, and quality outcomes across the CNMI. This body and the legislature as a whole can be rest assured that the Department of Finance and this administration have done everything it can to keep the government finances afloat and to ensure accountability as the CNMI navigates through this current pandemic, as well as recovering from two devastating disasters that has brought us in an unprecedented economic crisis. As results of these disasters, the CNMI finances went from a strong economic growth and progress in FY 2017 to an unanticipated and unprecedented economic decline because of Super Typhoon Yutu in 2018 and now the COVID-19 this year. Coming on board as the Secretary of Finance, I work closely, obviously, with Governor Torres and Lieutenant Governor Palacios to ensure that we address all the issues created by Super Typhoon Yutu. And as many times there were lessons learned from the disaster, and I have certainly informed and want you to inform that those lessons learned are trying to guide how we handle this COVID-19 response. Because from the beginning, as shared yesterday in some testimonies, the GAR is the direct liaison with FEMA and other federal agencies deployed for this COVID-19 pandemic. He was questioned, and he was the most equipped to answer a lot of the inquiries you have on these expenditures and the contracts negotiations. However, I want to share with the committee that I've been working closely with the GAR, the chairman of the task force, Office of the Attorney General, Office of Homeland Security and Emergency Management, and I wanted to make sure and ensure that expenditures were proper, legal, and within the emergency procurement regulations and framework. On the issues of the government employees being reassigned for COVID-19 response work, the department worked closely with OPM, Office of Personnel Management, to properly account and ensure that reassignment works were authorized and that we do not, to ensure that those employees and frontline workers have all the forms and documentation in order to be compensated. I am ready for any of your answers. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary, and I'm going to change it up a bit. I believe most of the questions is being directed in regards to the cabinet members and the extra time. So maybe if we can have Ms. Salas for an opening, and then I believe the members will have. Looks like it's directed majority to you, and then since the Secretary of Finance has mentioned that a lot of these payments were not made yet, the bigger ones has not been paid by this Sinamay government, and we're just waiting reimbursement. Maybe we'll uh, switch it around and ask the question to OPM first. And is there an objection to that, members? No objection. Ms. Salas, you may proceed. You can have your 2-minute opening remark, and then we'll open it up. Thank you.
Thank you. Good morning. Thank you for having me here today. I'm hoping that I can clarify a lot of the concerns you all have regarding COVID-19, most especially directly to the regarding payments. I would like to state for the record that OPM's role in this is that when RFPAs come for our review, we are there to basically review the employees' FLSA status, whether they are covered or they are exempt. Covered employees, of course, are qualified for overtime. Exempt employees are not qualified for overtime. And by the definition of overtime, I mean the 1.5 or above. So again, exempt employees are paid straight time, 1-to-1, nothing above that. And when an RFPA does come to our office, those are the things that we review, and as well as looking to see if all the signatories are complete, and then we move forward with the process. I am very concerned to hear that Representative Probst has mentioned that some of the constituents have filed, or not filed, but aired their concerns about not getting paid. I wish they would come to OPM so we can assist them in some way and verify what they actually got paid. We have the records of their time that they put in, and whether or not they got paid, I can work with the Department of Finance to ensure that they were properly paid. And if not, then we can move forward to look and see if they can get paid. I've never heard of such complaint, and I wish they would come to OPM. If they are covered employees, they are civil service employees, we need to assist them. Also, you know, our office, our goal at OPM is to promote public service and improve employee efficiency, and ensure that their civil service rights are being protected. I'd like to again thank you all for having us here. And I hope we can continue to have an open dialogue and to basically resolve some of the concerns and come up with solutions. So.
Thank you, Ms. Salas. And with that, and thank you for the clarification. I'll open it up with Rep. Castro, and then followed by Rep. Lipon for question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and Salas, Secretary Atelig, thank you for the time that you've allotted to join us here in regards to asking any questions we may have in regards to the matter at hand that we have been tasked to look at. This is a question for Ms. Salas. I need to ask because hundreds of our employees have been furloughed as a result of the fiscal impact of what we're dealing with right now, COVID-19. I need to ask, in regards to providing guidance, what type of guidance did your office provide to our departments and agencies on how the furlough should be conducted? Could you elaborate on that a little bit?
Okay. So prior to the departments issuing furlough letters, we met with the administration along with the Governor's Legal Counsel and the SAA. They basically informed us that there will be a deep decline of government revenues, and we needed to take action on how we would basically continue to provide essential services to the community with a limited number of staff. So therefore, in our regulations, there are two things that can happen: furloughs and also a reduction in force. So because of the time sensitivity, we knew that a reduction in force would not be possible at that very moment. A reduction in force is a very, how would you say, time-consuming analysis where we would have to take each and every employee's file and look at their service, performance, etc. So we proceeded with the furlough action. And it was discussed that the furlough would have to be for more than 30 days. So therefore, in our regulations, a furlough of less than 30 days would be considered an adverse action, and we did not want to go that route. So therefore, it was decided that because of the time sensitivity, a furlough notice to the civil service employees would be for more than the 30 days. So therefore, they were given 7 days notice. And again, it's not considered an adverse action. So anticipating that revenues are not going to be where we want them to be, our Office of Personnel Management, is currently working on the RIF. We are currently doing the RIF analysis in preparation in the event that we are not able to recall these employees. So with that being said, we discussed in several cabinet member meetings that cabinet members need to go back to their office, look at their listing of employees, see where or how you would be able to cut staff, but be able to continue the services needed. We told them to start from the bottom: provisional status employees, probationary, limited term, etc. I cannot say that that was done because of the next thing you know, we got the listing of the furloughed staff. However, I know that we left it to the department heads to make the right decisions as to who to furlough. And that's how we came up with the furlough list.
Okay, so in regards to that, so you're saying that these officials, the department heads, the agency heads, they selected the individuals who were going to be furloughed on their own. That was, or was there guidance that was provided?
We did give them guidance, like I said, verbally in the cabinet member meetings, and then also our former director issued a memorandum basically reiterating what we stated. Now that I look back on the memo that was issued, I think there could have been a bit more clearer instructions, reiterating again that they start from the bottom with the provisional, probationary, and limited term employees. But our office did provide guidance.
Okay, the reason why we wanted to get that from you is because we've kind of chance to talk to some of these constituents of ours who have been on that end of the list, and looking at some of those names ourselves, we're kind of wondering like where it came about in regards to who got furloughed and who stayed, because in some examples, an individual who just was kind of like fresh out of the box stayed, and a veteran who's been around for like decades, that type of a thing. So we kind of wanted to see how the selection process came about. I'm glad that you said that you did give these department heads their guidance, but guidance in regards to how to select these. However, though, we've in our work and trying to figure out the situation with this. I mean, those issues have come about So yeah, I wanted to get that out in regards to whether your office did provide that guidance to the heads and officials in regards to be furloughed. In regards to like further guidance, did your office provide like templates for these agencies and departments to follow in regards to how to draft their letters or how to talk to their employees in regards to all of this?
Yes, I was the one who actually emailed department heads and their administrative staff with the templates. And I basically stated that, of course, they need to make modifications where needed. Of course, they're not gonna, they need to have their department head sign off and so on. Make sure that the title and the names of the employees were correct. Yeah, we did provide the templates.
Okay, that's great to know. Last question though. I know you mentioned in between the first question and now that your office is currently doing an analysis on RIF. I know that you're preparing in the event that that has to happen. When these letters came out, did you advise the departments and agencies in regards to the furlough actions that they didn't need to constitute a RIF, or that wasn't put into your in regards to the guidance from your office?
We did not mention any RIF action at that time. And just so you all know, with the RIF analysis, it will determine an employee's retention points. So therefore, there could be a possibility of, like you said, a 20-year veteran of a department, because of his or her high retention points, may be returned to the department because they have more retention points compared to a newbie. So that's why we feel it's necessary to prepare ourselves. We do not want to be unprepared if, in fact, we have to implement the RIF. And with that being said, the regulations also state that with RIF comes a severance pay. So again, our intention also is to bring to you all, lawmakers, the amount that will be needed to pay these employees if ever we have to implement the RIF. Where we will find the money, I do not know. But like I said, we are preparing. So I think you guys could also start looking. Basically, I mean, I'm just being honest, because it's very clear in our regs that we have to provide a severance pay. And Joe Pangilinan, our chief, and Ms. Emma are here, and Joe is taking the lead on this RIF analysis, and it's very time consuming. It's very, there's many factors, and we're trying to work those out. So again, I'd like to keep open dialogue with you all so that, we do it the right way and proceed accordingly.
Thank you, Ms. Salas. My last question is in regards to you, Secretary Atalik. Just in case I might have missed it, I know that as of now, overtime is still being is still being paid on for you two. Am I correct, or is it still or have you reconciled most of that situation as of now?
You're speaking for you two?
Yeah.
All employees that are due overtime have been paid for you two.
Okay.
If an employee or any of your constituents say they haven't been paid, I just need to know and make sure that, and check my records. Now, keep in mind, when I went out to pay all U2 overtimes, I paid everyone 1.5, remaining people on the list, I paid them 1.5 overtime. And that was actually advised by U.S. Department of Labor that I do that, or else we could be cited. And so I ensured that everyone that was pending overtime was paid.
Okay, thank you very much. If my time might be running out, or if it has run out, I believe I may have some more questions for the parties at hand. Chairman Pro Tem, I yield at this time.
Thank you, Representative Castro. Recognize Representative Lipan.
Thank you, Vice. Good morning, Frannie. I still consider you director. I'm not going to call you acting. Fran, when did you start assuming the position as acting director for OPM?
June 1st.
Upon assuming this position, can you illustrate your findings on any concerns of OPM regarding the process of the RIF, for one, and the selection process of the COVID frontliners? Were you ever consulted as to who should be working in the frontliners as COVID? Was there any communication that you find that was provided to the former director in that aspect?
I was not made aware of any communication as to who would be selected or who was selected to work frontline, at the front line. There was never any communication. I don't believe the former director ever got any communication as well, as far as I know. No.
Because what I'm trying to allude, because it is OPM that's supposed to certify or approve of the exemption and not exemption, correct?
Correct. We will review their FLSA status, Fair Labor Standards Act status, whether they are a covered employee, whether they are exempt employee. We want to ensure that the covered employees get the 1.5 or above, and the exempt employees should only get paid 1.0. And I'm pretty sure that we certified all the exempt status employees at the 1-to-1 rate.
So here's a finding that, and probably just a yes or no. I enjoyed this yes or no kind of concept. I'm going to read this. The Director of Personnel has no authority to waive the overtime exempt status for employees not covered by the Civil Service Commission. Is this correct or no?
I've never read that before. I've never seen that.
This is our legal counsel. We asked him to review and give us his opinion on this under 1 CMC subsection 2052. Are you familiar with that?
No, I am not. But can I read you something from our regulations?
Please do.
The Director of Personnel may approve compensation time or extra payment to an overtime exempt employee at the recommendation of the employer in exceptional situations. Such situations will be considered the exemption and not the rule, and will be limited to declared emergencies and extraordinary work requirements.
So are you alluding to CAC subsection 10-20.2-340A5?
I am alluding to 120-10-115G.
Okay. So for civil service employee, I'm talking about civil service employee now.
Okay.
The change in overtime exempt status is required to be documented in a NOPA, the Personal Systems Rules and Regulation, as provided, which I alluded to you that section. If changes in a job description effectively change an employee's coverage of exemption under the
SA, a special position, personal action shall be prepared to document such change. Is that correct?
Correct.
So the list that was provided to the task force, some of it had the previous director's approval of that, and some has your signature.
Yes.
And you base that on what the notice of personal action, right?
Correct.
And their status, right?
Correct.
And that gave you that authority to approve, right, correct?
Yes.
It does not need to go to the Civil Service Board to approve?
I don't believe so.
Okay. So I'm going to switch gear. The RIF was open part of the determination per respective department, because what I'm going to try to allude to is regarding the evaluation process. You're responsible to make sure that notice to proceed, their personal action, all those things, your office is responsible. And my understanding that every fiscal year, there should be an annual eval, correct?
Correct.
When was the last annual eval?
Every employee is rated on their anniversary date. So it's done on a yearly basis on the person's anniversary date. So everyone has different anniversary dates.
But
So we,
is it been practiced?
yes, it is.
Because I am hearing that some agency and smaller scale agency, they have yet to do those eval. And what I'm trying to allude to is, on this eval, are they using this for the consideration for the process of RIF? Because even though you have an excellent example, a good employee, but attendance seems to be wavy, and you got an employee that needs supporting guidance, but the attendance is A plus.
Yes.
How is that? Can you
Thank you.
enlighten me, because
Yes.
I want to see the clear picture of how the RIF process is done.
Okay. So at the moment, we are not doing, we are doing the RIF analysis, but we are not implementing RIF until we are told to. So how the performance rating report works is, and the reason why I say yes, we are doing it now is because our office is issuing on a monthly basis what is called a within grade increase notice. And attached to that is a performance eval. So we send these out to each and every department with the person's name and their anniversary date. And we have sent out numerous memorandums and reminders to these department heads and their supervisors that we expect this back because it needs to go into their file. And I will tell you,
Is there a timeline?
they should do it before the anniversary date. So
Well-
we get it out a month prior.
I think when I said timeline, I mean your office should say,
Yeah.
Director, Secretary, I'm giving you 15 days. If failure to submit this, the consequences will impact your office.
Yes. Yes, I understand. And we have taken that into consideration because the Senate has also pointed that out to us. But I also want to state for the record that the person that loses out here is the employee because the supervisor is not doing their job. The supervisor's responsibility is to do this performance eval right before their anniversary date is up. Now, if they're too lazy to do it and to properly document what that person's rating really should be, it's the employee that loses out. So again, we have sent out numerous memorandums reminding them of this. And we can continue to do it and just hope that they submit these things. But every day we do get, I'm not going to say all of them, but we get a good number of performance evals back.
So, Vice, my next question is, does OPM do desk audit? And when was the last desk audit?
I mean, because you're alluding that
Yes.
supervisors are too lazy.
Yes.
I'm trying to correlate everything
And-
into perspective.
And thank you for that. We have been asking for an audit section for many years. I'm going to say that our former director did not feel that it was a priority. And I'm sorry he's not here to defend himself, but I recall several times that Ms. Emma Peters, our classification and compensation chief, felt that it was very necessary that we go out and audit. And I agreed with her 100%. But again, every time we brought that to the table, the director felt it was not a priority.
So you're saying
So my
that-
answer is no.
So you're saying it hasn't been done yet?
Correct.
And absence of a unit to do this, if there was a unit in existence, would that be the responsibility of that unit to be making recommendation to the head of the department and secretary that these are the people that should be RIF?
That would be a factor, yes.
Because,
That would be,
you know, when you do this audit, you're trying to find out the employee's, what is his job description, duties, and then you correlate with their attendance and all the
Right.
others with the
it
evaluation.
would also very well tell us if there was a duplication in responsibility and whether or not that position is really needed.
So
So yes, audits are very important.
my last question to you, in the current COVID frontliners, are all these employees currently on board? One, or some of them had been furloughed and reinstated back?
No,
Another?
sir, no. They're
And-
all active employees.
The last question, do you think that these employees that were furloughed should be considered to be reinstated, to be part of the COVID frontliners? Because it's not fair that we furlough X amount of good employees. I have to say they're good employees. And not given the opportunity to be asked, are you willing to be part of the frontliner? Support, staff support.
Yes,
I think that in fairness, they should be considered.
yes, I agree.
And for the extended list of furlough, some of these employees have obligations. And it's not fair that they're excluded to be part of this COVID task force frontliner staff support. And I think they're capable employees, if selected thoroughly, to be given that opportunity. I highly seek your assistance to reach out to the respective task force and allude this and show that, because the current employees that are on board, the wear and tear on their part, it's going to take toll.
That's true.
And I'm not saying they're going to be negligence, but wear and tear tends to include that failure to do their responsibility to make sure that they're doing their job while at their location, designated location. So with that, Mr. Chairman, I'll yield for this time.
Thank you, Rep. Lipan.
Thank you, Chairman. Just, Ms. Frannie, follow-up questions on the line of questions of Rep. Lipan. So the memorandums that you constantly shoot out to all departments and divisions, how's the turnout coming?
I would say in 2019, we have gotten a better response.
Okay.
Because like I said, we commenced issuing out the within grade increase notices, so which basically forced them to prepare the performance rating report. I'm not saying it's perfect, but I think some departments need to take a better look at the responsible person, and OPM also can do their job and just to continue to follow up with their submissions.
Thank you for that response. And with regards to furloughs, because you have mentioned that you have provided guidance to every department on the selection process, and how do you consider an employee to be put on the list of furlough? Have you guys ever gotten grievances lately since the implementation of the furlough to perhaps the OPM or the Civil Service Board?
I'm trying to recall. I'm not sure if the Civil Service Commission received any, because that would be the body as to which the grievance would go
Right,
to.
so not to your knowledge? No
Not
knowledge.
to my knowledge, but I also want to state that in the furlough letter itself, for civil service employees, is that it states in the letter that they will be returned back. That is our goal.
Right, but perhaps,
So hopefully, you know,
because I'm alluding to the guidelines that you have gave, and some of
Yes.
these people that were furloughed were decades,
yes, yes.
more than 20
absolutely.
years, and
Yes, service.
perhaps that defeats the guidelines that you have shared to each department. So,
Yeah.
not to your knowledge, no,
No.
grievance.
No.
Okay, and with regards to the notion about the RIF analysis, I know that you mentioned that Mr. Panglinan is actually working on it. Do
He's
you have
heading
to-
that team. He has a
Right,
team
so
of,
is there a time frame that we, I know that we're not there yet,
Yeah.
and I hope that we don't get there, but I'm glad to hear that your office is already doing that analysis,
Yeah.
because we have to prep ourselves for the worst.
Yes.
And if there is such an analysis, I would like to request, Chairman, that it should be submitted to this body too, if that's not too much to ask. Thank you. Are you, Mr. Chairman?
So after you, oh, you're open. Okay. So Rep. Sablan, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Salas, would you please provide this committee with the guidance and the template letter that you issued to the directors?
Sure.
Or to the department heads?
Sure.
Thank you. And what was the duration of the furlough period that was indicated in the notices that went out to employees?
I believe it said not more than 12 months.
Not more than 12 months. So, are you aware that the personnel system rules and regulations provide that furloughs longer than 30 days do constitute reductions in force and must follow the reductions in force procedures?
Yes, we understand that, Rep. Sablan. However, because of the time sensitivity here, basically we were told late March that there was going to be a deep decline in revenues and we needed to act fast. By April, early April, we were already issuing furlough letters. So we took the approach that it would be a furlough for not more than 12 months, and we would start working on the RIF. There was no way we would be able to perform the RIF during that specified time.
Why not?
Because we're talking about hundreds and hundreds of employees, actually thousands, to include Tinian and Rhoda. And if we came to the point where we already knew that we didn't have the revenues to pay all these employees, what was the government going to do?
Is there any exception in the civil service regulations that you can point us to that allows for the reduction in force requirement to be bypassed due to
I don't
time
think there is.
sensitivities?
No, there is not. But again, we did not just decide this on our own. We sought the guidance of the Attorney General's office, as well as the Governor's Legal Counsel, the SAA, even our Civil Service Commission.
And did you receive guidance from the Attorney General's office?
They were present in our meetings.
But did they say that you could bypass the reduction in force requirement?
I don't think they said it exactly that way, but when we presented the letters, they okayed those letters. They approved, or
And who is they?
the AG himself, Mr. Ed Manibusan, and Deputy Lillian Tenorio.
Are
Because,
you?
I'm sorry.
I'm sorry,
Because
continue.
basically also, they had to issue those letters as well to their employees.
How many employees were furloughed in all?
Over 500.
Are you aware that the personnel system rules and regulations require notice to the personnel officer of intention to take such action, reduction in force action, at least 60 days in advance?
Yes, we know that.
Did any appointing authorities actually provide that 60-day notice?
No.
And are you familiar with the procedures that are outlined in the personnel system rules
This is
and
the first time
regulations?
we've ever had to deal with RIF. I don't believe there was ever a time in the government, I could be wrong, but I'm not aware of the government ever having to go through this.
You stated,
Even furlough, even
Sure.
furlough.
Sure. You stated earlier that you wish that the guidance that had been issued to department heads had been clearer. Could you elaborate on that? What would you
Yes.
have made clearer?
Yes, the memo that our former director issued, I wish he would have just inserted a section there as to what was stated in the cabinet member meeting, which was start from the bottom. Start with provisional, probationary, limited term appointees, and then move upwards.
Right. And this is the process that is actually spelled out in your regulations as well, correct?
Yeah.
Starting from the bottom.
Yeah.
So it's first in, last out,
Yes,
right?
yes.
And that did not go out into the written guidance that the
It
department has
didn't,
received?
yeah, it should have been inserted in there just as a, I guess, to reiterate what was stated in the cabinet member meetings. But, you know, what could I do? It was too late at that time. I mean, he issued it, Mr. Seman issued it, so.
Okay. So if the department heads did not follow that guidance, what process did they follow instead in selecting which individuals to furlough?
I would not know, ma'am. All I knew, the next thing you know, that we got I was asked to start a running list to ensure that we, you know, had a list of furloughed employees. And that next thing you know, I was just getting the lists. And then also they were required to provide me with the fiscal impact of these furloughed / terminated employees.
So you received the list, and did you make note of employees who had been with the civil service for 20 or more years who were on these lists?
Just by looking at their names, I would not have known that at the time. I mean,
When
I
did you
would not
become
know.
aware that seasoned civil service employees were on these furlough lists?
When a few of my coworkers were stating that their friends said this, their friends said that, so
Has OPM taken any action to look into this matter?
I have not. I don't know if Mr. Seman did at the time he was there.
Do you intend to do that? Is this part of your RIF analysis now?
Well, like I said earlier, with the RIF analysis, those employees that are the senior employees, they could rightfully be put back because of their retention points. That's why we feel it's necessary to do this RIF analysis now and not wait. I just don't want to be unprepared if we are told that we have to implement this. Again, because with the furlough situation, we were, in a sense, kind of caught off guard, not knowing, what COVID-19 was going, how it impacted our revenues.
Sure. But you would agree, right, that your regulations actually do tell you that you need to
Yes.
implement a reduction in force?
Yes.
Because these furloughs are lasting longer than 30
Yeah,
days.
and we feel it's temporary. The furlough is temporary.
So were the lists that were submitted by each department, well, what was the process? Were they supposed to submit the list directly to you, and then you submit it to who?
I
Or
was
were there several
tasked
steps before
to,
you?
yes, submit it, put it together, and collaboratively work with Ms. Vicky's office so that we both had the right information. And I'm assuming it was also necessary for the budget preparation. But yes, I shared it with Vicky.
So, but I'm sorry, maybe I should be clearer. So the department heads prepared their lists, and then they submitted them to you, and then
Yes.
you submitted them to Vicky,
Yes.
Ms. Vicky Villagomez.
We kind of
with
compared
OMB.
to make sure that we were on the same page. I will say that not all departments provided me their list. I had to continue to go back to Vicky to, for the check and balance. I'm not sure why they weren't providing it to me. They didn't feel
Okay.
it necessary, but
And from Vicky, where did it go?
the list?
Yeah.
I'm not sure. I don't know if she provided it to anyone else.
Who ultimately approved the list?
Who ultimately approved the list? As far as I know, once the letters came to me and the list came to me, that was it. I'm not sure where it goes. I don't know.
To your knowledge, were the lists that were submitted by each department ever altered, either to add or subtract employees?
My list, I did not make any alterations.
But
Oh, okay, so perhaps, yes, there probably were, because when I went to OMB to do cross-check, I did notice there were some names that were added and then some names were deleted.
who would have
So,
made those changes?
I don't know, ma'am. Maybe Vicky? I'm not sure.
And do you know what basis those changes would have been made on?
I do not know.
You don't know. So Ms. Villagomez would know that.
I wouldn't know for sure, but she also had a list, so I basically modified my list to match what she had, because I didn't get any notice from any other department stating that a certain person is being removed or called back or
I
what
see.
have you.
So Ms. Villagomez had her list, and you had your list, and sometimes the two did not match.
Right.
And so you made yours match Ms.
Yes.
Villagomez's list.
And at this moment, at this time, even after the furloughs took place, OPM again sent out another memorandum stating and directing all department and activity heads that if you are to recall anyone, you must provide us some kind of approved notice of such, so that we know who to put back on the list. And again, it's all because we need to have an accurate account of who is being furloughed and who is not.
The DPS commissioner during the budget hearing stated that he made his furlough decisions based on performance and loyalty. Is that an appropriate standard to use in making furlough decisions?
I would say no. I don't believe it's a appropriate standard.
And what standard should have been used?
Performance, reliability,
Under the civil service regulations.
and whether or not they
for
are considered
furloughs.
essential, yeah.
What about seniority?
Yes, seniority for sure.
And to your knowledge, did other department heads or other cabinet members, for that matter, use the standard of performance and loyalty in making their furlough decisions?
Not that I'm aware of. I never was included in any conversation of such, nor, in any meeting of discussing that. My role was strictly to receive furlough notices and log them in on the list and ensure that we have a fiscal impact amount.
Thank you. Just last couple of questions for you, Ms. Frannie. So I wanted to refer you to the part of the civil service regulations that state that the right section? So, no, going to anything longer than 30 days shall constitute reduction in force. So you would agree, Ms. Salas, that there is no exception to this rule that any furloughs longer than 30 days constitute a reduction in force and shall, at least not in your regulations, there's no exception, and shall follow the reduction in force process?
Right.
Okay. Yes. Okay, in any case, we did receive a sample letter, or actually a letter that went out to one of our furloughed civil service employees that indicated that they had no right to appeal their furlough. Did all of OPM's template letters advise furloughed employees that they had no rights to appeal?
Yes, because it's not considered an adverse action. If the furlough is to be less than 30 days, it would be considered an adverse action, and they definitely would have the right to appeal.
But what was the legal basis for that advice? Could you point us to the regs where that says that an employee who is facing a reduction in force because it is longer than 30 days has no right to appeal? Because I'd like to draw your attention to employee appeals, subpart F. Counsel, if you could bring us to that section. Section 10-20.2-275. So that does provide an employee of the personnel service to appeal personally and or in writing a decision to take adverse action resulting from reduction in force procedures.
Yes.
Right?
So
And-
if we do implement the reduction in force.
But the regulations establish that any furloughs that are longer than 30 days are reduction in force actions and should follow the reduction in force procedures. In which case, the employee should have the rights to appeal.
You're right.
Thank you for establishing that, Ms. Salas. So now that we have agreed that employees should have the rights to appeal, will OPM and the administration take any action to restore the due process rights of our personnel service employees who have been furloughed?
Perhaps our office should work with the Attorney General's office because they also approved the letter. They gave us the okay to proceed.
Yeah. Do you have an assigned
So,
assistant AG?
No, we do not, and I wish we did.
Have you requested that?
I believe we have in the past.
You have.
Not
Okay.
just during my
Yeah, I
tenure.
wish that you did too.
Yeah.
And that seems to be a running pattern in all of our hearings where there have
Yeah.
been these legal questions raised, but counsel from the Attorney General's office just doesn't seem to be readily available.
Also, I would really like to state that when I heard about the legal opinion that they came out with regarding this, you two, no? I called and asked for a copy, and they would not give me one. I even called
Really?
OPA and asked for the same thing, and they would not give me one. So again, I wish they would include us if they are saying that their opinion states that there's something wrong.
Right. Did you
I would-
request a legal opinion for OPM?
No. For you two, because that was for you two,
For
right?
you too, or even for the COVID-19 pay that was issued to employees?
Yeah, maybe we should.
Yeah.
I will.
Okay. And I would be happy to give you a copy of the Attorney
Oh,
General's
great.
opinion if you haven't seen it yet.
I have not seen it.
Okay, I will do that.
Okay.
Thank you. I yield, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Rep. Sablan. Rep. Probst, not.
Not long? Because I'm a non-member? It's okay. Thank you, Chairman. Again, thank you, Director Salas and Secretary. Hatalig for coming in. Director, in April and June, OPM received and approved 3 requests for waivers submitted by the Special Assistant for Homeland Security. There was a request of April 17 for 27 employees, a second request on June 9 for 20 employees, and a third request on June 10 for 6 employees from Tinian and Rhoda. For the record, would you please describe the purpose of these requests for waivers?
Wow, I don't have that in front of me. I don't have a copy. I wish I would have brought it if I had known.
One sec, we have a
If you
copy.
have it, okay.
One second.
Okay.
Rep. Ropes, you may proceed. We're running out of time.
I'm
and we
sorry.
still have the
Okay,
Secretary
thank
of
you.
Finance.
So, again, for the record, would you please describe the purpose of these requests for waivers?
Yes, this is to request exemption waiver for overtime exempt employees
Okay. Did,
for additional compensation.
thank you. And were you one of the persons included for these waivers?
Yes.
Yes.
At the time, I was only working 64 hours. I had to come in on Fridays and Saturdays to produce these payment authorizations.
Okay. Did, and who signed these waivers?
I believe if it was prior to June 1st, it was Mr. Semen. If it was after, no, Mr. Semen, yeah, June 1st. He was myself. There's no one else.
Okay. So there was no one else
We only
that,
had 4 staff at the
Okay.
time.
and no one else that could sign it other than yourself? Okay. Were you concerned about any potential conflict of interest by signing your own waiver?
Quite honestly, yes, but I thought about it after. And I was basically under the gun to get these payments out. Like I said, I'd have to come in on Friday and Saturday when I was not scheduled to work, when I was not allowed to work.
Has
Because, yeah,
Has OPM approved such waivers before?
yes,
You have? If so, if yes,
Yes.
then when have you approved such waivers?
during Typhoon U2.
During Typhoon Yuna. Okay. And we understand that
Even, I must say, also sometimes during election time, when some of the attorneys at the AG's office have to work the extra hours to do whatever they need to do, they also get paid
Okay.
additional hours.
I appreciate that. And duly noted is the fact that you said you have
But-
no legal counsel?
We do not have any legal counsel. And again, to go back to that, they only get paid the 1-to-1, the straight time.
Chairman, I yield for now. Thank you.
Is there, I believe we still have the Secretary of Finance. Is there any other question that you members pose to the Ms. Salas before we excuse her? Okay. Okay, if there's no objection, Ms. Salas, thank you for clarifying a lot of the regulations. Should the committee decide to recall, we appreciate you coming back again and to clarify. I know there's some issues with the AG and the OPM, so we're going to clarify those with the statements you've made earlier and seek their guidance, and then we can proceed. Otherwise, you're excused.
Okay,
Thank
thank you, absolutely. And Ms. Reptina, I will get you the template letters that you requested.
Thank you. And actually the memos that you mentioned as well, that the written guidance that went out to the department.
Sure.
And I will get you that opinion.
And do you want this back?
Yes, please.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Short recess while we wait for the Secretary of Finance to return. Thank you. So
Yeah, it's going out to the outside.